When fame steals childhood, childhood is meant to be simple, a time for mistakes, growth, and safety. But for some, childhood ended the moment the world learned their name. Before they could fully understand who they were, they became what everyone else wanted them to be. They were praised for being gifted, rewarded for being exceptional, and pushed forward while still learning how to be human. Fame came early, applause came loud, and childhood quietly disappeared. This is not a story about success. It's a story about the cost of early fame, about pressure replacing play, about expectations replacing protection, about children carrying adult burdens far too soon. From Hollywood prodigies to global pop sensations, these are the stories of stars who grew up in the spotlight before they ever had the chance to grow up at all. This is Celebrity Unscreened, and these are the celebrities who lost their childhood because the world asked too much, too early. Coming up next, Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Culkin, at the age when most children are learning who they are, he became someone the world already claimed. For Macaulay Culkin, fame didn't arrive gradually. It exploded. A child made into a global icon. One movie changed everything. Suddenly, his face was everywhere. His voice echoed in homes across the world. And his name became a brand before he could spell responsibility. Adults laughed. Studios celebrated. Audiences adored him. But childhood doesn't survive mass attention. It dissolves under it. Working when others were playing while other kids went to school, Macaulay was memorizing lines. While others made mistakes in private, his mistakes would have been headlines. Schedules replaced playtime. Contracts replaced choice. Expectations replaced protection. He wasn't just acting anymore, he was carrying the weight of an industry. When success became pressure, money came fast. Fame came faster. But emotional maturity doesn't arrive on a red carpet. Behind the scenes, the environment grew tense. Legal disputes, family conflict, and adult battles played out around a child who had no control over any of it. And when the camera stopped rolling, there was no roadmap for what came next. The cost of growing up publicly, as Macaulay stepped away from acting, the world didn't let go. His appearance became gossip. His silence became speculation. Instead of being allowed to disappear and heal, he became a cautionary headline. But what many forgot was simple. He was never broken. He was exhausted. Reclaiming a life, slowly years later, Culkin would speak calmly about his past. Not with anger, but with clarity. He chose distance, privacy, and a life not built for applause. Because when childhood is taken too early, adulthood becomes about rebuilding what was missed. The lesson: Macaulay Culkin didn't lose his childhood because of failure. He lost it because the world decided he was ready before he ever had a choice. Next, Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore, a child star raised by the spotlight. Some children lose their childhood quietly. Others lose it publicly, while the world applauds. For Drew Barrymore, fame didn't wait for permission. It arrived before guidance, before stability, before safety. Born into a legacy, not a choice. Drew Barrymore didn't grow up chasing Hollywood. Hollywood was her inheritance. From a legendary acting family, she was introduced to cameras before she could understand boundaries. By the age of 7, she was already a global star. While audiences saw charm and innocence, behind the scenes, adulthood crept in far too early. Adult worlds, child consequences. Success surrounded her, but supervision did not. She entered rooms meant for adults. Adopted lifestyles meant for people twice her age. And absorbed pressures her mind wasn't prepared to process. There were no clear rules, no firm limits, no pause button. Fame became her environment, and chaos became normal. When childhood collapsed, by her early teens, the damage was no longer invisible. Struggles surfaced publicly. Interventions followed. Rehab didn't arrive as healing, it arrived as containment. A child being corrected for circumstances she was never protected from. And the world watched, labeling her troubled, without questioning who allowed the trouble to grow. The fight to reclaim herself. What makes Drew Barrymore's story remarkable isn't that she fell. It's that she climbed back, slowly, deliberately, and honestly. She rebuilt boundaries, redefined success, and learned adulthood on her own terms. Not in front of cameras, but away from them. The lesson: Drew Barrymore didn't lose her childhood because she was reckless. She lost it because the adults around her mistook talent for readiness. Next, Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan, when growing up, became a spectacle. Some childhoods fade quietly, others unravel in real time, under flashing cameras. For Lindsay Lohan, fame didn't just arrive early, it stayed too long and watched everything. Hollywood's favorite teen. As a child, Lindsay had something rare: natural talent, charisma, and timing. She wasn't just acting, she was carrying entire films. By her early teens, she had become a household name, marketed as wholesome, relatable, and endlessly promising. But success came packaged with expectation, and expectation doesn't wait for emotional readiness. No room to grow in private. While other teenagers were allowed to experiment quietly, Lindsay grew up publicly. Every phase was documented. Every mistake amplified, every misstep monetized. There was no separation between who she was and what she represented. Hollywood didn't just watch her grow up, it demanded it. Faster, louder, without pause. When fame turns predatory. As she transitioned from child star to young adult, the system around her changed. Protection faded, exploitation crept in. Suddenly, attention came with judgment, and visibility came with punishment. The same industry that celebrated her youth became fascinated with her struggles. Her pain became entertainment. Labels are easier than responsibility. Instead of asking why she was unraveling, the world asked what's wrong with her. Trouble became her headline. Complexity became her stereotype. But what looked like rebellion was often exhaustion. What looked like failure was a child star trying to breathe, stepping away to survive. Eventually, Lindsay stepped back. Not because she gave up, but because she needed distance. Distance from expectation. Distance from scrutiny. Distance from the version of herself the world refused to release. Her story isn't about downfall. It's about what happens when growth is denied privacy. The lesson: Lindsay Lohan didn't lose her childhood to recklessness. She lost it to a system that demanded performance before allowing development. Next, Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber fame at 15, pressure for a lifetime. Some childhoods end on movie sets, others end online. For Justin Bieber, fame didn't grow slowly, it went viral. Discovered before he understood the world, Justin Bieber wasn't discovered in Hollywood. He was discovered on the internet. A teenager singing into a camera, unaware that millions were watching and judging before he fully understood who he was becoming. At just 15, his life changed overnight. Tours replaced school, crowds replaced friends, and global attention replaced privacy. Growing up with no off switch, unlike the child stars before him, Bieber's fame didn't end when filming stopped. Social media made him accessible, everywhere, all the time. Every haircut sparked debate. Every relationship became news. Every mistake became content. There was no space to grow quietly. The world watched him mature in real time and reacted to every phase. When pressure turns inward, the expectations were impossible. Be grateful, be perfect, be mature immediately. But adolescence doesn't disappear because fame arrives. Struggles surfaced, behavior shifted, and criticism followed faster than concern. Instead of asking how a teenager was coping, the world asked why he was acting out. Admitting what fame cost as an adult, Bieber spoke openly about the toll, about loneliness in crowded rooms, about anxiety beneath applause, about losing a sense of self before it was ever formed. He didn't just lose privacy, he lost normal development. And rebuilding that as an adult meant unlearning survival behaviors formed too early. Choosing healing over applause, stepping back became necessary. Not as a retreat from success, but as a return to humanity. Boundaries replaced availability. Silence replaced constant visibility. Because when childhood is interrupted by fame, healing becomes a long, intentional process. The lesson: Justin Bieber didn't lose his childhood to excess. He lost it to unfiltered access, where the world entered his life before he learned how to protect it. Next, Shirley Temple. Some childhoods end on movie sets, others end online. For Justin Bieber, fame didn't grow slowly, it went viral. He didn't just lose privacy, he lost normal development. Shirley Temple smiling through a childhood that was never hers, before conversations about child stars existed, before laws, safeguards, or public concern. There was Shirley Temple. She didn't just become famous young. She helped invent the idea of the child star, America's comfort child. During one of the most difficult periods in American history, Shirley Temple became a symbol of hope. Her smile lifted spirits. Her tap shoes echoed optimism. Her image reassured a nation looking for light. But symbols don't get to rest. And comfort for millions came at the cost of one child's autonomy. A career before consent, Shirley worked relentlessly. Long filming hours, strict schedules, adult expectations placed on a child too young to understand them. Her performances were polished, rehearsed, perfected, not because she chose them, but because the system demanded them. She wasn't just acting, she was performing emotional labor for a nation. Innocence as a product. Her childhood wasn't protected, it was packaged. Studios controlled her image. Contracts controlled her time. Public perception controlled her identity. She wasn't allowed to grow up naturally, because growing up threatened the brand. Innocence had to remain frozen, and childhood became something she portrayed, not something she lived. What history didn't ask. For decades, her story was framed as a success, a happy child star, a wholesome icon. But history didn't ask the deeper questions. What does it cost a child to never be allowed to stop smiling? What happens when identity is assigned before it's discovered? Stepping away to survive. Shirley Temple eventually stepped away from acting. Not in scandal, not in collapse, but quietly, choosing adulthood on her own terms after childhood had been decided for her. Her story didn't end tragically, but it began without choice. The lesson: Shirley Temple didn't lose her childhood to chaos. She lost it to control, a system that valued performance over protection. Next, Jennette McCurdy. Jennette McCurdy, when no was never an option. Some childhoods are taken by chaos, some by pressure, and some by control disguised as care. For Jennette McCurdy, fame didn't just arrive early. It arrived with conditions. Success that came with strings. Jennette became successful young. She was praised for being professional, rewarded for being compliant, and celebrated for putting others first. But behind the scenes, success wasn't freedom. It was obligation. Her career advanced because she learned early that saying yes kept everything running and saying no wasn't an option. When boundaries aren't allowed, the adults around her decided what was best, what roles to take, how to behave, what feelings were acceptable. And when discomfort appeared, it was minimized, because the machine needed to keep moving. Childhood wasn't protected, it was managed. The price of silence. As years passed, the cost became heavier. Anxiety, disordered relationships with control, a growing sense of disconnection from self. But externally, everything looked fine. Success often hides the damage it causes best. Choosing truth over comfort. What sets Jennette McCurdy's story apart is that she chose to speak, clearly, unapologetically, and without performance. She named what was taken. She questioned what was normalized. And she refused to pretend it was okay. Not for sympathy, but for truth. The final lesson? Jennette McCurdy didn't lose her childhood by accident. She lost it because adults failed to listen when a child needed boundaries more than success. Closing reflection. Segue into outro. Segue into outro. Across every story in this documentary, one truth remains. Talent does not equal readiness. Fame does not replace protection. And success is meaningless if it costs a child their sense of self. What fame took too soon? Fame doesn't arrive gently. It doesn't ask if a child is ready. It doesn't wait for protection to be in place. And it doesn't pause for development. It rewards performance, and often ignores the person performing. Across these stories, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Talent was praised. Success was celebrated. But childhood was treated as expendable. Play became pressure. Guidance became control. And growing up became something that happened publicly, without safety, without consent. What makes these stories uncomfortable isn't just what happened to these children. It's how normal it all seemed at the time. Because applause is loud, and concern usually arrives too late. This documentary isn't about blame. It's about awareness. About remembering that behind every gifted child is a developing mind. Behind every prodigy is someone who deserves boundaries, patience, and care. If these stories made you pause, if they changed how you view fame, success, or early stardom, then this conversation matters. Because protecting childhood should never be optional. If you believe celebrity stories deserve depth, not mockery, context, not headlines, and humanity, not exploitation, subscribe to Celebrity Unscreened. We don't just revisit fame. We examine its cost.